Welcome to episode number 4, that one where we are all back, mostly. This is Mr. Ryan. I talk too much, but I get paid for most of it, Riley, and I'm with Mr. Peyton. Where my hoops at, Arthur?
Well, I can tell you, you said we're mostly back, and I feel mostly back. I don't feel completely back, but it's good to be back on episode 4.
Yes. What a great way to end the week. You know, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to just be talking about the week. I like doing it fresh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's the best way to do it. I would have done it fresh last time, but we were in the midst of running from a hurricane. But enough about that.
That's right.
Laura has had enough of my time. She done stole my internet, and I'm done tired and talking about her. So, Mr. Arthur, we are up to Where Is This?, which is stories from our week.
And what an interesting week it was.
Wow. We had ups, we had downs, we had laughs, we had not so laughs. You know, it was everywhere. Do you have anything in particular you want to start this off with, Mr. Arthur?
I'm going to let you go. I know you had a bunch of notes from this week, and then I'll kind of fill in the holes.
Okay. So, you know, and I'm not going to go through everything because we take extensive minutes, Mr. Arthur.
Yes.
You know, that I'm really trying to preach, you know, keeping minutes, having a record of what we've done, what we've seen. And, you know, we're doing some, and you're doing it in your classes too, a little bit of a Quizlet to review, get some terms down that they need to know, and just kind of, you know, work with the words. You know, it helps to work with the words, seeing them often. And Ag 3-4 gets competitive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know you got a large class when we're in there, and so you may not hear it, but we want to know words better than the rest of our class. That's where we're at. And one of them said, you know, probably 4 or 5, or I guess there's 3 or 4 teams typically, and one of them said, I didn't win, but you still lost to one of their... Yeah, so, you know, they're just keeping that competitive flair. It's important to keep the competitiveness, especially, you know, when we weren't seeing each other, now we're seeing each other. You know, keep it lively.
Absolutely.
And this one's going to kind of go over your head because you're not a Star Wars guy.
Yes.
But for some reason, one of our young scholars mentioned that there's always a bigger cup, which is a reference to episode 1, and I don't even remember at this point what bigger cup it was, but the Star Wars fans in the crowd were very happy that there was a episode 1 reference. But of course, I know that doesn't mean anything to you.
No. Not really. Well, I don't have a specific quote or anything from this, but one of my best memories from this week was I took a page from your playbook where I gave my students some sticky notes at the end of class to ask me a question. And I told them it didn't have to relate to agriculture, it didn't have to relate to my class, just something maybe they were curious about. But actually, most of the questions were related to agriculture or the class itself. And one of my students, you know, wrote on her sticky note that something along the lines of she was glad she decided to take ag. And, you know, that kind of sparked an interest in me. So I took the initiative to write back every one of my students on a sticky note and give it to them. And some of the, you know, the looks on faces when they read my note and them wanted to paste it in their notebook. And it really made me feel good about what we're doing with our program and our classes. I think it's a place that students want to be. I think it's a place that students enjoy being. And if we can keep that up, I really think the future of Winfield FFA is going to be bright.
I absolutely agree. I think, you know, that personal flair that we have we're very different,
Mm-hmm.
but we're going in the same direction. You know what
Right.
I mean? I think it's and, you know, we mentioned this most episodes that, you know, we complement each other very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so happy to see that you're seeing that spark
Yeah.
in the kids. One thing, I'm going to save one of them for when we get to quotes, because it wasn't a student.
Mm-hmm.
It was, we came across it as we were learning, but the things, Mr. Arthur, if we have
Okay.
time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, we have a young scholar in Ag 3 that is also the president of our chapter,
Right.
and he is trying to be a leader. He's a pretty good leader. He's trying to be an even better leader.
Right.
And one of his classmates said, Peyton is agriculture. And then they stopped and they looked at him and said, hey, Peyton, what do you believe in? And Peyton said, I believe in the future of agriculture. And he went on a second or two, and then he ended it with, those lines are etched in my soul.
Hmm.
And, you know, knowing
That's
Peyton, it's very special. And knowing Peyton, you know, there's a little bit of jest in there. You know, there's a little bit of humor. But what we try to get like Ag 1 to see is that these words mean so much to so many people. What was the national membership this year? The
It was over 700.
That's what I was thinking. Over 700,000 people. And, you know, when you factor in the actual alumni and the current membership, and think about how many millions of people have said the FFA creed.
Right.
And, you know, I tell that story in Ag 1 about seeing the lady in Bowling Green, and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
she talking about, you know, the creed and FFA and all. And it brings so much of us together. And to have current students talking about how much the creed means, you know, even if he's, you know, kind of joking, but it is etched in our soul. It's etched in all of our souls. And I thought that was really special.
I definitely is. And I think that, you know, this year's been a little different, but as we continue to teach the creed to our Ag 1 students, I hope that they get that same feeling that we're, you know, and it's a little different because we're not here on Fridays, and that would usually be the day that we would do the creed. And I think it's special to hear every class member stand up and say the creed, but and they're, you know, they're not getting that same experience. But hopefully, by the passion that we've shown when we're talking about the creed, that they'll understand the importance of that 5-paragraph statement.
I completely agree. And I'm definitely not going to call out his name because I don't want him any more embarrassed than he already will be. But, you know, when we have our young creed speakers that are going to be getting ready for competition and they'll be saying it in class, you know, maybe that'll add some extra vigor to the need to learn it and the need to see how important it is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to end on a funny note because that was kind of deep.
Okay.
Food science today, we're talking about innovators in food science.
Right.
And the innovators that I wanted to focus on today for their quiz coming up, I wanted to focus on people that when I go through the grocery store and I see these brand names, I learn about the people behind the brand names.
Mm-hmm.
So we're learning about Kellogg and Post and Armour and Birdseye and all these people that, you know, it just sounds like funny company names, but there's actually people.
Right.
They were innovators. They created a business, and, you know, their company, for the most part, most of those that I just named, over 120, 40 years old. And I think that's a real special thing to see. I always like knowing more behind the story kind of stuff. And we learned about Mr. Kraft.
Mm.
And Mr. Kraft, for those of you who don't know, you know, the guy that founded the Kraft Company that we all love for the cheese.
Mm-hmm.
He was a pioneer in processed cheese. And, you know, we're talking about how much Kraft macaroni and cheese means to so many of us.
It's got to be in almost every cabinet pantry in America.
You know, I think the term is ubiquitous. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And one of our young scholars in third block said, "What would we do without cheese?"
Yeah. I think that's a fair question.
I think it is a fair question. What would we do without cheese? So I think that about wraps us up for Where Is This, unless you have something else, Mr. Arthur.
No, I don't think I can top what would we do without cheese, though. I think we can move on.
Let's set our sights onward. So our next segment, the next portion of our show is When Is This? This is FFA news, mainly poultry and LDEs. That's basically where our news is this week.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Arthur, if you would like to talk about poultry and the practices we have, and I'll cover LDEs.
Sounds good. So, next Friday, I believe that date is the 25th, is going to be our poultry contest from last year. Due to coronavirus and Hurricane Laura, it's continued to get pushed back, but we finally have a date. It will be next Friday. We are excited about our students being able to put forth that knowledge that they studied so hard to learn last year. We will be having practice for poultry next Tuesday and Thursday from 3:30 to 5, as well as opportunities for you guys to take a little bit of time in class to brush up as well. We are, like I said, excited. We hope that we can do this one for Mr. Vines. I know it's been a while since some of you have practiced poultry and studied that, but I know that as soon as we start looking at it, it's going to all come flooding back to you, and that our students are going to represent us and the community of Winfield in a very powerful way.
You know, poultry means so much to the community, so much to the parish. It's something special, and I think every school in the parish, you know, keeps a poultry team. It means a lot to the district, and we're kind of in that poultry belt. And you know, great pride in the poultry tradition here at Winfield, and I'm so glad that we have kids that were sad that they couldn't do it in the spring and still, you know, wanting to go through with it right now.
Right.
So that is actually for the 1920 year. You know, just backtracking a little in our competitions. The next competition for this year, this actual year, is going to be all of our LDEs, all of our leadership development events. And that is something that I'm really excited about. It's one of the most fun practices that you can have. It's, you know, my dad used to talk, Mr. Arthur, about this guy he worked with, and his daughter was a great athlete. She went to school with not a lot of great athletes.
Right.
And, you know, she loved basketball, but their basketball team was terrible.
Right.
She loved softball, but their softball team was terrible. She loved track and field because she didn't have to rely on anybody else but her. And for most of our LDEs, that's how they operate. And I think it's really special. We get some of these driven kids, these kids that want to show what they know, to work hard, and LDEs really give them that opportunity. So for those types of events, we have all the speaking, all the speech writing, the prepared speaking, Gulf of Mexico speaking. We have Creed speaking. We have Go Teach Ag, and we have employment skills. And we still have some slots open. So if kids are interested, if students are interested, you know, they can see either one of us, and we would happily, you know, guide them in the correct direction or a direction they want to go in.
Yeah, we would love to have as much participation as possible. And if necessary, we can have school contests, you know, to find the best two. And so we're excited that our students are excited about LDEs. We've had so many questions about when's P-Law going to start, And I know Mr. Riley and I are both excited to get the P-Law ball rolling. That was a mouthful. So I don't have anything else to add on that. That was just my 2 cents.
Let me 1 second. I'm taking notes. P-Law ball rolling. Okay, we need that on a shirt or a sticker or something. P-Law
That was amazing. Yeah.
So, okay. Again, just keeping the minutes, keeping it real, keeping it fast. The other part of it is the part that means the most to the Winfield Ag Department, the most history, the most tradition, the most legacy is parliamentary law. If you think Winfield Ag, 8 out of 10 individuals would say parliamentary law. And that's because, how many is it, Mr. Arthur? 11 state titles?
I'm not sure if it's 11 or 12. I think Mr. Vines won 11, and then we have one in the 40s.
Right.
So I think it's 12 total.
Okay. Yeah, 12 sounds right, because I think I remember seeing, 10th on one of those plaques, but that wasn't the most recent one.
Right.
Okay. So, that's a tradition that is, you can't overstate how much that means to the school, to Mr. Vines, to the community, really.
You can't go anywhere in Winfield without finding someone who has participated in or remembers Mr. Vines teaching them P-Law in class. And I think that's something special that both of us want to continue, and we're going to strive for excellence in that area.
Absolutely. And that deserves an absolutely, Mr. Arthur. It deserves it.
I've said it 3 times. You're at 2, so we're getting there.
Well, hey, keep the tally going. So we definitely have room on the parliamentary law team. There will be plenty of opportunity for them to show what they know. So definitely want to keep that going in a positive direction. And so as we go through this, if anybody is interested in parliamentary law, we will definitely help them out.
Yes, absolutely. And, of course, we can only take 2 teams, so 12 total students. But, we still have conduct of chapter coming up in the spring. And so, the students who would train for that, and those freshmen specifically for that contest, we would love to have them at least have some P-Law under their belt before we get to the conduct of chapter contest.
Yes, that gives them 2 opportunities. And I think our conduct team I wasn't here for P-Law team last year, but I think that conduct team had a lot of fun.
I think they did too.
So that's really gives them a lot of opportunities to really show what they know. So, Mr. Arthur, do you have anything for when is this?
I don't think so. I think that's about all I have.
Same here. So that's all for when is this, and we will move on to the next segment. All right. So next we have why is this? This is where me and Mr. Arthur go through some of our favorite quotes and kind of relate them back to what's happening around the ag department.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mr. Arthur, I guess we're going to keep with the going back and forth between us on these.
Sounds good.
What? Do you want to go first or me?
I can go first.
Okay.
This week I'm looking for some quotes, and definitely some that I've heard before. But one of the first ones that I came across is one from John Wooden. I think I used John Wooden last week in our podcast, Hall of Fame coach at UCLA. But this is a message that I think is important not only to our students, but it was an important message to myself. And he said, don't let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. And through things that have been going on with, school and personal life, and you have to always take a step back and think, what's next for me? And then what can I do? And there's some things, like he said in the quote, that you can't do, that it's just out of your control. And you can't let those interfere with what you know that you have to get done.
I don't know, Mr. Arthur. I think you're hitting too close to my home. Like, oh man,
mm-hmm.
I struggle with that.
Yeah, it was definitely took me back a step for sure.
And to come from the man, John Wooden.
Oh yeah,
he did more for teaching men how to be men than anybody else.
Absolutely.
Especially in his generation,
I mean, you think of all the walls that he tore down at UCLA, and we won't get into all that, and how that still echoes and holds true today. It's very inspirational.
Yes, to have the legacy he had, and when he gets done with his legacy, well, I say the legacy gets done. When he gets done with his tenure, his legacy lives on. And, the books written about him, a lot of times are in the leadership section, And I think that really speaks to the high character, high quality of a man that he was.
Mm-hmm.
My first quote is, I'm really bouncing between the way I want to do this, but I guess on that, not really that same vein, but I get bogged down into what I can't do sometimes.
Yeah.
And I have a quote from, it's really easy. We do what, one of my kids at Lakeview one time said is like, Mr. Riley, you know how to do everything. And I was like, no, hush. I don't know how to do everything. And he's like, but you have to know how to do so many different things to teach ag.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you do? And I was like, and I'm not good at hardly any of them. But we have to know such a vast part of a sector of industry that's in everyday life.
Yeah.
And we want to be good at all of it. And sometimes, especially like when I was in college and even now, I really get bogged down into what I can't do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my greatest asset is this quote that I'm getting from Jeff Passan, who, a sports writer. And this was about Michael Jordan. And he said, motor matters most. Michael never stopped thinking, never stopped, his brain was always moving.
Yeah.
And I get bogged down into what I can't do, but my greatest asset is my mind never stops. I'm always thinking, sometimes the kids will be like, Mr. Riley, why are you sad? I'm like, I'm sorry, did I look sad? I wasn't sad, I was thinking. And, me and you were walking back to the ag department earlier, and you said, you said, joked something about, I must be in a bad mood. And I said, what? And you're like, you're not talking. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize I wasn't talking.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, I'm planning, I'm scheming, and motor matters most, and that's what we want from our kids, if they can just show that they're trying.
Right.
If they can just put forth effort. Some ag teachers and coaches would be like, meet me halfway. And, I told you the other day, I was like, I'm telling kids, meet me a quarter of the way. I'm a maniac. I'll go the extra quarter and meet them. But that's my first quote, Mr. Arthur.
Okay. Well, I think it's absolutely crazy that my next one piggybacks off of that. You just said, you're talking about kids meeting you halfway, and you got to give a little to get a little. And my next one is a Pat Summitt quote, and she says, you can't always be the strongest or the most gifted person in the room, but you can always be the most competitive. And competition is something that drives me, something that made me want to be an ag teacher. I think it's something that drives the majority of our students because we're so involved in contests. But there's powerhouses in anything, and in some contests, Winfield may not be regarded as the powerhouse, and that's okay.
Right.
But we're going to come with 110%, and we're going to give it everything that we have and be competitive. And that's what's so special about our students that we have here in our ag department is they're always willing to go the extra mile for us, and it makes all the difference in the world. We have students up here, that stay until the afternoon, late in the afternoon after school, practicing and just wanting to be around our ag department. And I think that makes all the difference. It makes us be probably what I think one of the most competitive chapters in the state.
I think this community is so special. The school is really at the center of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And kids, we have such a climate that they want to be here, and I completely agree with that. I think about, you talked about powerhouses, and I was bouncing between where I was going to go with my next quote, because I'm looking at about 5 or 6, and because I was kind of scatterbrained, Mr. Arthur.
Yeah.
I was kind of bouncing around, but what you were saying really, with powerhouses and how, different chapters are good at stuff, different teams are good at stuff, and you almost don't see it when it changes. I remember thinking in the 2001 was the first years that I was into college football, and University of Miami was king. Yeah. That was the Larry Coker years, and they were really good. And I was like, man, how are they ever not going to be good? Because people are going to see it, they're going to go, whatever. But you don't realize change as it's happening.
Yeah, that's so true.
And that builds into my next quote. Food science, we did a virtual field trip with Cargill, and we did, Cargill was just kind of showing what makes them special, and Cargill means a lot to the ag community as a whole, but to the food sector, they're invaluable, the work they're doing, and you don't realize it. But anyway, that in their, they're interviewing people, and then Cargill had their own promotional little ad in it, and they said that change will never be slower than it is right now. And that it makes you stop and think. And maybe some of our kids listening to this are like, I don't even understand that. Because it took me a second, but the more I think about it, it's so true. Because I want kids to think about 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. 2 days ago was the 6-month anniversary of us being told that we couldn't come back to school.
Right.
And that postponement was indefinitely, as I think I fit postpone indefinitely in every podcast. But when it started, it was indefinitely. We didn't know what was happening, and the next little bit, it felt like it drug on forever. It felt like I couldn't go and get my chips and queso for 1.5 years to 2 years.
Right.
Because when you're in the middle of it, you don't realize that change is happening at a rapid pace.
Mm-hmm.
And, think about, school and the school board and the parish and all. We've had to be so flexible because we didn't know what directives we were going to be under.
Right.
And change is happening at such a fast pace. And, due to Laura having to go back to a 4 block instead of a 5 block, and all these changes that are happening, you don't realize that, okay, you're in a nice rhythm, and then change happens again. Mm-hmm. And, now looking back, we've had, so much change. But if change is always speeding up, it's always going to be more and more and more. And so, we've talked about our kids being resilient, and that's like the greatest gift they can have right now is resiliency and being able to bounce back and just being able to go with it. And that's probably the most long-winded quote I need to ever do.
Well, all I was sitting here thinking was I was shaking my head. What else can I say besides absolutely? But I think it's kind of fitting. Absolutely. So, real deep quote from you, Mr. Riley. So I'm going to end on a light note. That was only your second one, wasn't it?
It was.
All right. Well, I'm going to end on a light note. How about that?
Well, I ended the stories from the week with a light note, so you end yours with a light note. So, when I was a kid, one of my favorite movies of all time was Miracle Worker. And I don't know if anybody's ever seen that movie. If you have, you probably watched it with a grandparent. But it's the story about Helen Keller. And, anybody that knows that name knows that she was born
had a fever, became blind and deaf, but ended up being a huge advocate for education and for those with various abilities in education, and somehow being deaf, ended up being able to speak. And so just a real pioneer in that area. But she had a quote that I think relates directly to a student that I teach every day that I love. And I'm going to call her out after I read the quote, but you're going to know who I'm talking about. But Helen Keller says, "A well-educated mind will always have more questions than answers." And today, I didn't know if Joy could ask me any more questions. But that's how Joy is. And Joy makes me a better teacher because she makes me think of things that I wouldn't normally think about.
Yeah.
And but anybody that knows Joy knows that if you say something, Joy's going to derive at least 5 questions from it. And so when I read that quote from Helen Keller, I just thought, about Joy, and I really reflected on the teacher that Joy makes me. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that from her because she really does, like I said, makes me a better teacher.
She really does. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Joy for a couple of years. And, she'd come and be with us sometimes for youth events and things. And she'll ask questions that no one potentially has ever thought of.
That's right.
And I don't say that in jest. I say that, it's a brilliant mind, mind to ask questions. And you were right. You have to be on your toes because she's going to ask questions, and it makes you think.
Mm-hmm.
And I was bouncing back and forth, Mr. Arthur, going back and forth because I had one that I wanted to end with that was kind of but I think I'm going to end the podcast with it. It's just going to be a good go forth and conquer, if you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean.
So I was thinking, these quotes are supposed to be things that, are molding, that have molded us, and we want to pass that on, right? I mean, that's right. That's kind of where me and you are going with this. And there's a book that I'm not going to talk about the book because I don't want to get into it because, I can get pretty long-winded. But it's talking about it's about growing up. It's about these 2 kids, and one of them lives with his aunt, and he's living with his aunt for the summer, and he's playing with a neighbor, and there's some crazy things happening in the house, and they're going back and forth. They're having an exchange like kids do, like trying to come up with what's happening. And one of them's like, "Man, my aunt just says it's my uncle, and he's like painting ducks." And the other one's like, and here's my quote: "Grown-ups are always thinking of uninteresting explanations." And so I'm thinking about Joy, and that the mind she has, and she's always thinking and wanting to ask questions. And I want all of our kids to embrace that creative soul in them. Me and you can get bogged down. Well, I'm pretty silly. Well, and you're pretty silly. But like a lot of people will get bogged down and they'll try to make kids uninteresting.
Right.
And, if kids can really embrace that creative spark, we started LDEs, and so we're in the speech writing, and we're, about to start with P-Law debates and all that thing.
Mm-hmm.
We can't teach creativity.
No.
But if we can encourage it and just, push them, and as an adult, if we cannot, get caught in our uninteresting explanations.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the lightheartedest that I can end the quote section today.
Well, I think that's an excellent quote. And, when students come in your classroom, I talked about those various abilities in education earlier, but creativity is one that a lot of students have. They carry that in their back pocket. And if we can somehow foster that, not just as ag teachers, but just as educators in general, it makes up for a lot of difference in class. And last year I remember giving an assignment where I wanted students to draw their own emblem in our FFA unit, and some of the stuff that my students came up with blew my mind. And I don't think freshmen get enough credit sometimes for being, because they're the youngest in the school. But that freshman class last year blew me away with their creativity, and I hope that soon we'll get into some things where our current freshman class can shine in that area as well. But we offer art here, and anytime that I'm able to give crayons and markers and colored pencils to students and let them just be creative and work, I think that's such a beautiful thing.
We go to teacher school, and that's the hardest of the learning styles to hit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one that we get caught. And I'm not gonna hit the drum of the standardized testing killing teaching. I'm not gonna do that. But we get caught in the fact-based learning,
right?
And we all do across every curriculum. It happens.
Right.
But if we do find those ways to foster that creativity, I think that's a beautiful thing, really.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mr. Arthur, do you have anything else for our Why Is This?
I don't think so.
That was a good one.
That was a really good one.
I shouldn't pat myself on the back in the middle of a podcast, but I enjoyed that. I guess that's what I should say. I enjoyed that very much.
I also enjoyed that. I thought it was a good one, and hopefully students will actually tune into this, because I think if they can spend about 18 minutes of their life listening to that, I think it'll change the outlook on a day completely.
I think so too. I really do, and I really like this is going to be their assignment, because there's nothing more leadership than what we're trying to do right here.
That's right.
That will wrap us up for Why Is This? So we will be going into the next segment. So finally, that takes us to What Is This? The segment of the show that is sweeping the nation, where Mr. Arthur tries to learn a little bit about music that has happened since the invention of Play-Doh, and I try to realize what happens with an orange ball that goes through an iron hoop. Mr. Arthur, would you like to go first or second?
I always like to go second on this one.
I know you do. You really like to show me up at the end, and you know what? I like it. So,
all right,
Mr. Arthur, we are going to go through a little of music history.
Okay.
This one is not very well known. It's a band that I really enjoy. I've been with them, I think, since the beginning, and that's what I really like about this portion, is that, if I've been a fan of them for a while, I really like to showcase that. So, we're going to do the typical thing. First, you're going to guess what kind of band, okay? This is Wikipedia's description of Young the Giant. Young the Giant.
All right.
That's the band name, Mr. Arthur.
Yeah, I'm thinking. Young the Giant.
Young the Giant. And
I would say it's a pretty creative one. I kind of like that name.
Isn't it good?
Yeah.
Especially, we're here talking about youth and the power of youth, and, how much it pains me to put a band name that has the word giant in it.
Absolutely. I'll absolutely that all day long.
As a proud LaSalle High School graduate from the correct side of LaSalle Parish, it really hurts to say that I like these guys, but they are thankfully not from Louisiana. They are from out west.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna tell you briefly. You said the history of music, and I got real excited. I thought we was going to talk about the the Appalachians and the flat top boxes, and I thought we was going to talk about things I knew about. But obviously, That's not the direction we're heading today. So, Young Giant.
Yes.
And I'm throwing this from left field.
Yeah.
I have no idea Obviously, I've never heard of this.
Okay.
But I'm going to go with indie pop.
Ooh, you know how much I love my indie pop.
And that's why I went with it. It was totally out of left field.
That was a good guess. That is not the correct answer. The band that was founded in 2004 under the name The Jakes would soon turn themselves into Young the Giant. They are an American rock band.
Okay.
Now, I will say, and that's why I established the rules, in episode 1. This Wikipedia says in the first line, if you Google it, that's what pops up, and that little synopsis on Google. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. On the right, it'll give that little banner that'll have, their origin and genres and years active and all that. On that, one of the subcategories that they are under is indie pop.
Oh.
So I'm going to give you a bonus half star, Mr. Arthur.
All right, I appreciate that.
So I was trying to come up with different ways that we could play this last thing.
Okay.
This last game, I was trying to come up with something where it just wasn't true or false or this or that or whatever. So they have had 4 studio albums. Okay. I'm going to give you the titles, and I want to see if you can put them in order.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to give you the full title, and then I'll give like a keyword so you don't have to keep repeating the whole title. Okay.
Okay.
So the first one I'm going to give you is Home of the Strange. Like a house in Doctor Strange. So strange. The second one I'm going to give you is Mind Over Matter. The third one I'm going to give you is Young the Giant. And the fourth one, the last one, is Mirror Master. Like I'm looking in a mirror and master. So Mirror Master.
All right.
So we have Giant, Matter, Strange, and Master. Put them in order, Mr. Arthur. From oldest to newest.
Okay. Give me half a second here.
Yeah.
I'm going to repeat it back to you. This is not my answer.
Okay.
You said, I don't. This is probably not the order you said, but Giant, Master, Strange, and Mirrors.
Yes.
Or is Masters and Mirror in the same one?
Master and Mirror is in the same. Mind Over Matter was the other one. Matter, yes.
So I'm going to go with first is Giant.
Yep.
Second is Mind Over Matter.
Okay.
Third is Mirrors. And fourth is Strange.
Oh, Mr. Arthur, you are so close. If this was a placing class, you would have scored like a 40. Oh, man. You flipped the bottom pair.
Dang.
You flipped it. So, Young the Giant, released in 2010. Mind Over Matter, released in 2014. Home of the Strange, released in 2016. And Mirror Master in 2018.
All right. Well, I'm going to tell you this, and I think the audience by this point understands that my taste in music is different. It's not real broad. But I think I'm going to listen. I think I'm going to listen to these people. I'm kind of interested.
Okay, yeah, it's some good stuff. Some of their early hits that was on the first album would be featured on like The Voice, American Idol, and stuff. Okay. So it was some pretty good hits early on.
When I was in 9th grade, I had an English teacher, and she only stayed at the high school for a year, but she was in a rock band, and she exposed me to a lot of crazy rock music I came to like it. I think it's pretty interesting, so I'm gonna give that a listen.
Okay. I swear that you came from a fictional land, Mr. Arthur.
Yeah.
There ain't nobody that ever had an English teacher that was a rock singer. That just This place did not happen.
Well, she was Christian rock, but she was a punk rocker. So yeah.
Well, you're just making it sound more fictional, Mr. Arthur. None of that sounds real.
I don't know what to tell you.
And that was Hornbeck. Moving on.
All right, so I spent a lot of time this week coming up with kind of like riddles that are packed full of information and history. There's probably more information in these 3 riddles than I have taught all week long. I mean, you could write a book on all of this stuff, but
for all the listeners, that means I'm about to fail this hard.
But even if you fail it hard, I think that you're going to learn something out of it. Okay. You were talking today about Ag 3, and they said, had so much fun they forgot that they learned. I think you're going to learn some stuff out of this. But I will tell you, Mr. Riley, this is the last week that I'm going to do this style. We're going to move into more fundamentals of basketball next week.
Oh, okay.
We're going to wrap up our history unit, and then we're going to move into something different, okay? But here are 3 riddles, and they don't rhyme because I'm not that cheesy, okay? But from the hills of Walnut Grove, Mississippi, this woman was one of women's basketball's toughest, most intense competitors. The women's basketball programs at Middle Tennessee, Stephen F. Austin, and LSU were all blessed to have her as their head coach from 1962 until her death in 2004. She posted a 752 and 308 record during her coaching tenure. Who is this women's basketball coaching legend?
Okay. So...
And I can repeat any of that you need repeated.
Well, you could repeat the whole thing in French, and I think I would know just as much. The thing is, I would have started. She passed in 04? Is that what
04, and LSU was her last school.
Now, was she at LSU when she passed?
She was.
That's very sad. Wow, you're really starting your quiz with a real sad one, Mr. Arthur. I'm sitting here and I'm just drawing a complete blank. I don't even know where to guess. So I'm just going to pass on this one.
Okay.
Feed me some knowledge.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you a story. And those of you that have had me in Ag know that I worked with the men's basketball team at LSU for a year. And one afternoon I was trying to find something in a supply closet. And it was real dark in there, and all I had was my phone flashlight, and the door slammed shut on me. And so I couldn't see anything. It was completely dark in the room. And it was, any of you have ever been to LSU to a basketball game, it's in the Pete Maravich Assembly Center. And it's a big round, I don't know what you call it, Mr. Riley. It's not really a coliseum, but it's a big round arena.
Right.
And so I'm in one of these, those awkward shaped closets that they would have and something like that. And I turn around to try to find the doorknob, and my flashlight finds the face of a statue of the 4'10" life-size statue of Sue Gunter. And that's who it was. And that woman, to this day, every time I see a picture of her, it freaks me out just a little bit. But, Coach Gunter was absolutely a legend. Like I said, she's from Mississippi, went on to Middle Tennessee, stayed there for a while, and then found her way back as close as she could get to Mississippi, and took 2 or 3 LSU women's teams to the Final Four. And he coached people like Simone Augustus and Sylvia Fowles. Just incredible coach and recruiter.
Wow. I remember when that happened. I couldn't remember the name. Because I would have been middle school. You would have been what, elementary? Elementary
school.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, here's one that maybe you've heard the name of. So we'll go with riddle number 2.
Okay.
On the other side of Louisiana in Dallas, Texas, a young man was born in 1945. He would serve as assistant coach for the Louisiana Tech during the first NCAA national championship. Take over the reins 5 years after Sue Gunter's departure from Stephen F. Austin, before moving into the SEC. He has since coached at Arkansas and now at Texas A&M. Who is the coaching legend with a .712 win percentage?
Is he still coaching?
He's still coaching. He was on the bench with Leon Barmore and Sonia Hogue at Louisiana Tech for that first national title.
Wow. And he's the one coaching the women's at A&M?
He is.
Whew. That, I know I'm going to know this name. I know this name.
I think you are.
I cannot think of this name, but go ahead and hit me with it, Mr. Arthur.
Okay. So, Sonia Hogue, as Mr. Riley, as you know, was the coach at Ruston High School.
Right.
Came straight out of high school to start that program there at Louisiana Tech, and she saw a young man over in the Dallas area who was coaching a high school team that was very successful. And at the time, Leon Barmore was probably one of the first men, to get into the coaching of women's sports on that level. And they got Coach Gary Blair out of that high school in Texas and brought him over to Louisiana Tech, where he has since turned Stephen F. Austin, Arkansas, and now Texas A&M into a national program.
That's awesome. I love hearing the alma mater have an impact on people, and that was the golden era for sure. Is you were in the community, Mr. Arthur. Is Leon Barmore highly regarded across the country? He
is. He definitely is, and there's some controversy there about how much of it was actually him in back then in the early days, and a lot of people give him way more credit than they do Coach Hogue. But he is an excellent basketball mind that is regarded all over the country, and to have him there or here in Ruston, Louisiana, still supporting the Lady Texters and women's basketball in general is a huge. It's an honor, really.
I don't want to talk too much because I'm kind of like I was talking about earlier. I'm not the smartest person on a lot of things, but I think it shows. When they're trying to point the blame at or the point like who should get the most credit, I think it really goes to show how it's more than one person everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And what Sonia did with recruiting and what Leon did with the X's and O's, really can't be overstated,
No, it cannot. I have one more, and I think you're going to get the answer to this. And it's not really because you knew it, but once I give you this riddle, I think you can probably figure out. At least I'll give you a couple guesses anyway.
Okay.
Staying on the same track with Gary Blair. Gary Blair led the Aggies to their first ever Final Four appearance in 2011. Unbeknownst to Aggie Nation, this appearance would lead to their first national championship in women's basketball history. Coach Blair became the oldest women's coach to win a national championship at the age of 65. The road was not an easy one. First, they had to defeat Baylor, Stanford, and one more storied program. Who was that program?
Okay.
And I'll tell you that it was not UConn.
Okay. Well, that would have been the go-to.
Yeah.
So 2011. Okay. Can I ask two questions?
Okay.
Was it east of the Mississippi?
No.
Okay.
If my geography's right, no.
If your geography's right.
It's Midwest, and I'm trying to think what side of the river. I think it's on the west side.
Okay. Story program, probably going to be like from the states of, that could be like a Michigan, because that's kind of, where even is Michigan? Wisconsin, Minnesota, that kind of stuff. Story program that is not.
I'm going to just tell you, I'm not a geography teacher. Let me look it up, because your geography is obviously better than mine.
Well, I wasn't trying to make this a geography thing.
No, but I want to be sure that I'm right.
Okay. So, as you're looking that up,
It is East. It is East.
It is East.
It is East.
Okay. So, okay. What were the other schools that took them out?
The other schools were that they took out on the way to the national title was Baylor and Stanford.
Baylor, Stanford. I need a good women's team. You said storied, like a good program, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So, east of the Mississippi, but probably hugging the Mississippi. So, it could be, I'm going to have to go. Well, but you would have known that. You see, I wanted to go UT, but then you know what side Tennessee is on.
Yeah, no, it's not UT.
Yeah, so you know where Kentucky is. Ooh, Notre Dame.
It is Notre Dame.
Yes.
Woo! And they beat Notre Dame 76-70 in the national title game after squeaking by the other two by, I think, a combined like 6 points.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was a big deal. And I remember watching it on TV that night and thinking Muffet McGraw was going to throw her heels across the floor. And Gary Blair bringing that title back to the state of Texas. So,
wow.
And then the next year, a little history that Baylor in 12 brought it, 2 in a row back to Texas. So
right.
It was a pretty good feeling to have it close to home.
Outside of Baylor and A&M, has any other Texas school won the women's?
Yes.
Who?
Jody Conrad took the University of Texas in the 80s. And then Cheryl Swoops, who was a player at Texas Tech, won it in the 90s.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Mr. Arthur, I learned something.
That's what this is about.
I had a good time, and I kind of cheated and, made you – I did some detective work on getting that one out. But, hey, you do what it takes to win. Motor matters most,
That's right. Motor matters most. I'm excited to switch gears and talk more about the fundamentals of basketball coming up in the future. I'm a history buff when it comes to this kind of thing, but I think, you can only take history so far before you bore your crowd. So we're going to switch it up a little bit next week.
Well, I would like to be a better fan, Mr. Arthur. And I think what I'm missing most is fundamentals,
Awesome.
Because being that most of the NBA most of the basketball I'm exposed to is NBA, and that's just manning up, and that is very boring.
Yeah.
So I think had a great episode. We are finishing up. I want to end this. We're talking about change. We're talking about learning. We're talking about getting in a rhythm. And I want to end this, Mr. Arthur, with a quote. I'm not going to tell you where. I'm just going to read it. And we're going to say our byes, and that's going to be it. If that sounds like a plan.
Right.
I remember every doubt. That's why I believe. I remember every failure. That's why I succeed. I remember every defeat. That's why I win. I remember rock bottom. That's why I know where I'm going. So let's go. Do you know where that's from?
I do.
Yeah. As not a fan, I love that so much. So guys, this has been episode 4. I'm so happy to be teaching again. We love education. So happy to be back with us at, I would say, about 90%. And let's go. Let's do this.
This week has been, and this podcast tonight has been fun. It's been real. And I'll even tell you it's been real fun. And I'm looking forward to our next week, even though we've got a couple of schedule changes where I'm going to be seeing some smiling faces for 106 minutes at a time. But I cherish every minute I get with the students. And I know that Mr. Riley feels the same way. And we are ready to take on next week and ready to be back with you on Friday with our 5th episode of our podcast.
Sounds like a plan. I think I'll make plans to be there. And guys, we'll see y'all next week. Bye.